In a statement, the Sanders campaign said, quote, "The corporately owned media may not like Bernie's anti-establishment views, but for the sake of American democracy, they must allow for a fair debate in this presidential campaign." Well, we're joined right now by Symone Sanders, National Press Secretary for the Bernie Sanders campaign. She's joining us from Burlington, Vermont. That is the state that Bernie Sanders represents in the Senate. Symone, thanks for joining us. Start off by talking about the significance of this breach. Your campaign has been shook up. You have a top digital staffer who's been fired and 2 others who've been suspended.
Thank you for having me this morning. So yes, we were alerted late last week that a breach had indeed happened due to a failure by the DNC's vendor. After discussions with the DNC, it came to our attention that one of our staffers had inappropriately accessed data that is not acceptable to the Sanders campaign, so that staffer was fired. Thursday and Friday, we found out Friday that the DNC had shut off our access to our voter database. That was an egregious overreach of the DNC, and that was unacceptable to us. So we stood up, and we're so happy that 550,000 folks across the country stood with us and signed petitions on Friday asking and actually demanding that the DNC restore our access to our voter database. That is a database that millions of people across America have worked to compile. That is a database that our over 2.3 million contributions have paid for, and that was a database that was ours. We are happy that late Friday evening, early Saturday morning, access to our database was restored. And Senator Sanders, you know, on that debate stage Saturday night, he did great. It was a big night for him. And he came out with boundless energy. He apologized for the issue at hand on our staffer, and he also apologized to our supporters because that is not the kind of campaign we're running. And then he got back to talking about the issues.
Is your campaign alleging that Hillary Clinton's campaign may have done the same, taking advantage of this breach in the DNC database?
You know, we don't know. That is why we are calling for an independent investigation of the DNC's handling of all the campaign's data during this campaign season, because there's no way for us to know without an independent investigation.
Now, I wanted to ask you about the press coverage. First of all, a lot of people might be surprised today to even know there was a Democratic debate on Saturday night, because these debates are taking place on Saturday night. In fact, the next one, well, it's not Saturday night, it'll be Sunday night of the 3-day Martin Luther King weekend, huge football weekend, right? That's going to be January 17th. Who determines when these debates will take place? The Republican debates get massive attention. They're during the week. Why are these sequestered like this?
You know, I'm not sure. That is up to the DNC. The DNC sets the debate schedule, and here we are coming off the heels of a Saturday night debate this Monday morning. We put out a press release recently talking about the Bernie blackout, if you will. As you noted, a report recently came out that noted that Senator Sanders had only received 10 minutes of coverage from the flagship television newscast this year, 20 seconds from ABC World News Tonight, just 20 seconds. So we know that Senator Sanders is attracting thousands and thousands of people to his rallies across the country, more than any other presidential candidate in this race, Republican or Democrat. We know that he has raised millions of dollars. We just announced that we have over 2.3 million contributions to our campaign, more than any White House bid in history. Senator Sanders in Republican matchups does better than Secretary Clinton with Donald Trump and other Republicans in this White House race. He snagged endorsements from Communications Workers of America, the Working Families Party, Democracy for America, the National Nurses United, American Postal Workers. But these things are all but ignored by the flagship television newscast.
So do you think that you're being as ignored this week when you have this issue of the controversy and the glitch? It'll certainly turn things around, reporting on Bernie Sanders negatively.
Well, I definitely don't think we were ignored on Friday or Saturday. And it's unfortunate that it took a quote-unquote fiasco or scandal, if you will, as other folks were reporting it, an issue for flagship news stations to cover what is definitely a competitive Democratic primary. But look, despite the fact that some flagship news stations have decided, have essentially locked Senator Sanders out of some of this coverage, the political revolution is rolling on. Senator Sanders' name ID is going up. In the Des Moines Register Bloomberg poll that came out last week, Senator Sanders was polling at 39%. In that same poll in January of earlier this year, he was at 5%. So even without this coverage of these flagship television news stations, Senator Sanders' support is growing. We are going out and we're meeting voters where they are in communities across the country, not just in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, but in Virginia, in Alabama, in Colorado, and all across this country. We are reaching out to folks and asking them to join the political revolution.
Interestingly, the presidential candidate who gained the most Twitter followers during the Republican debate last week was not one of the Republicans, was not Donald Trump. It was Bernie Sanders. Now, this was right around the time that Bernie Sanders did that interview with Killer Mike, the well-known rapper, hip-hop artist in Atlanta, Georgia, who introduced him at a rally there and also did that barbershop interview with him. Can you talk about the significance of this support and also Bernie Sanders, something that didn't get tremendous attention just a few weeks ago, going to Sandtown, going to Baltimore, to where Freddie Gray was killed, and why he did this right at the beginning of December?
Yes. So I think it's important to note that the political revolution is a multiracial political revolution. The political revolution is young people, it's old people, it's men and women, gay, straight, white, black, Latino, who are standing up saying enough is enough. And America is just not for the billionaires, that we, the everyday hardworking people, want to be a part of what is happening in our democracy. So yes, folks like Killer Mike have joined the political revolution. People like Susan Sarandon have joined the political revolution. And I think it's important because the senator's platform, it just goes to show that it speaks to a broad range of people. Yes, on December 8th, we visited Baltimore, Maryland, and the senator took a walking tour of the Sandtown, Winchester neighborhood, which is the neighborhood where Freddie Gray lived and where he was arrested. That walking tour was extremely important because as you walk the streets of that particular neighborhood in Baltimore, you notice that there aren't things like a grocery store, that there aren't things such as a bank of a branch. So where do folks cash their checks? Where do folks go to get quality groceries? The senator remarked in a meeting with pastors following that walking tour that, people don't understand, but it's very expensive to be poor. And that visit to Baltimore not only shined a light on communities across the country that deal with these exact same things, but it also brought up issues of education. We talked about issues of economic inequality. We talked about historically black colleges and universities. We discussed these issues with African-American civic leaders and religious leaders from across the country. It was a very rich and fruitful conversation for both sides, and I think it was an amazing visit.
Symone Sanders, I want to thank you for being with us, National Press Secretary for the Bernie Sanders campaign, speaking to us from Burlington, Vermont. This is Democracy Now!